Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining me for today's interview with David Saussy on his upcoming seminar on Neil Gaiman's American Gods. My name is Melanie Blake, and I'm the Director of Classical Pursuits. And I'm here today, of course, with David, who is the co-founder and president of the Symposium Great Books Institute and a seminar leader for the Institute and for Classical Pursuits. David brings wide and deep experience to everything he does at Classical Pursuits and has offered seminars on topics ranging from classical Indian texts to the musical Hamilton. He has a BA in liberal arts and an MA in Eastern classics from St. John's College in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And our topic today is his upcoming seminar on American Gods, which starts September 7th and runs for 4 weeks. Each session will be at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. So let's get started. David, my first question for you is this. In your seminar description, you pose a question that you think both Neil Gaiman and Alexis de Tocqueville, who you led a seminar on previously in Democracy in America, are concerned with. And this is the question that you say they're concerned with. Is it possible to love America, which is so wild and messy, so vulgar, and riven with conflicts and paradoxes?
Yes, and this is, I mean, to place de Tocqueville together with a popular writer like Neil Gaiman might be really surprising for many people from a classics, great books perspective. But I think that there are some really deep similarities between them that are well worth taking a look at. Neil Gaiman, like Alexis de Tocqueville, were from other countries. Alexis de Tocqueville, of course, was French, and Neil Gaiman himself hailed from England. And so there are these outsiders in a certain way to American culture coming to America and looking at what a strange and fascinating and messy place it is, in a certain way coming to grips with it. And that was one of the primary teachings that Alexis de Tocqueville, I think, really tried to work through in Democracy in America, was to go back home to his fellow Frenchmen and say, hey, look, America, yes, it's a messy place and it's not as, organized and neat as we might wish, but there's something really special there. There's a sort of vitality that you can't get in any other way that might be worthwhile taking a look at. And so that was sort of one of the fundamental teachings of the Democracy in America. And I think that Neil Gaiman is attuned to the similar, to the same thing that de Tocqueville is in his book, American Gods.
I was separate from the seminar. I was talking about this topic with Anne Kirkland, the founder of Classical Pursuits. I was in Toronto this summer for Toronto Pursuits, and she was. I think this was before your seminar went up, but she was up on our site, but she was reflecting on this same question as somebody who is from the US, but has spent a lot of her adult life in Canada, and two countries that are very similar in a lot of ways, but very different in other ways. And she sees, I think, some of this, both messiness and vitality in the US. And my second question is, what would you, so this is the first seminar we're offering that is focusing on a book by the very prolific Neil Gaiman. And what would you say to somebody who has maybe heard of him, but hasn't read anything by him, or somebody who doesn't know anything about him, or somebody who thinks, oh, I don't know, doesn't he write fantasy? That's not my jam. What would you say to those people?
Well, I would say, to someone who's never heard of Neil Gaiman or is not familiar with actually reading the books, that American Gods would be the first book that I'd want you to read by Neil Gaiman, especially if you're interested, as I know many of our readers are, in world mythology. And that's what's really special in a certain way about this book, as opposed to many of his other hit books that he's written. He's written a lot of books that are very popular, including books on Norse mythology. He wrote a wonderful book on the retelling of Norse mythology. But the story, the kind of conceit or the fundamental premise of American Gods is this. We all know that North America was a land where many Europeans came to, and there were indigenous peoples living on the North American continent, and they had their own folklore and their own gods, that they worshipped, including down into Mexico as a part of North America, of course, and Aztec. We have the Aztec civilization, as well as all the different North American tribes. So typically, when we learn in the history books, we learn that many people from Europe came to America seeking religious freedom, to worship as they please, whether they're Protestant or Catholic. That was a very important kind of promise that the New World in North America held out to people coming from Europe. But Neil Gaiman, the storyteller, takes that and he wonders, what about all of the folklore that people from all around the world, including Africa and the Middle East and Europe and Asia, coming to the New World and coming to North America over various periods in our history? What about all of those stories and those indigenous lifeways and gods that were from those traditions? Suppose that these gods are actually alive, says the storyteller imagination. What happens to them when they come to this new world, right? And so that's sort of the fundamental premise is to see how all of these people are coming to North America with their lifeways that eventually get forgotten in the hustle and bustle of a democratic world. But if these gods are real, just say, what happens to them? Where do they go? Well, they become outlaws and they become grifters and they become, con artists in a certain way. And so you have this wonderfully, this rich world where like Odin has his own identity as a kind of wandering grifter in North America. And Anansi, who is an West African god, also has a kind of life in North America that nobody knows about. They're hidden, they're concealed, and they're making all kinds of trouble in a certain way. And so it's a very appealing story that gets told, from a perspective of world mythology in that way. But then what happens when these gods come into conflict with the new gods, the gods of media, the gods of, they're actually characters in the book, which are gods that Neil Gaiman has. For example, I'm looking at a catalog, a very extensive catalog in the annotated edition of American Gods. And you have, for example, the god of the credit card, the god of the freeway, the god of the internet, right? The god of neon. And so very much in the style of the Theomachy of the Iliad, where at the kind of climactic point of the Iliad, you have the gods dividing against themselves and coming into a great battle. This story involves a battle between the old kind of homeless, placeless gods that are wandering around North America making trouble, and then the new gods that are being introduced to the new world, the gods of media and the credit card and the freeway and this kind of thing. So in the middle of this are perfectly ordinary people trying to make their way through this great battle that's seems to be mounting and taking place in the story. So anyway, it's a very fascinating read, and I think it would be appealing to those of us like who have been interested in stories like the Iliad and world literature of all kinds and mythology from around the world. It speaks directly to all of those stories that we have been interested in engaging in. So.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend this book in particular as a way to get started with Neil Gaiman. And it's surprising to me to be offering this in a certain way, because I love to concentrate on, say, the classics like Democracy in America, and Plato's Republic. I did a seminar with you on Plato's Republic as well. And so to kind of depart from the works that were, built and written pre-20th century, and to concentrate on a work by a living author is a certain, in a certain way, a departure from what I myself am in the practice of doing. that's one of the things that intrigues me about this, is the way it does enter into a dialogue with these ancient sources that are informing our life, whether we realize it or not. So and like I said, he's asking the same question, I think, that de Tocqueville asked when he wrote The Democracy in America. And those of you who joined for the Hamilton seminar would be interested in this. And it seems to be, there's clearly a common thread. Like, so I did Democracy in America, and then Hamilton, and Neil Gaiman, American Gods. And I think that all these works are all connected together. So those of us who are really puzzled about this phenomenon, America, and how to approach it, and want to approach it in a very richly imaginative way that really offers food for thought, would be really interested in this book.
And as you mentioned, this conversation that continues, and I think a lot of times we think, oh, it does continue right into the 21st century. It doesn't the idea of this conversation that's starting in the ancient world and continues through. We often focus on the Enlightenment as a period in conversation with the ancient world. It continues up through our own day, right? And by people who are writing and thinking and imagining now. So
I mean, it's remarkable. This book itself, we don't know what book that's published today is going to rise to the level of a classic, and I don't know certainly if American Gods will. But if you look at bibliographies that are compiled around this book in particular, I mean, there are dozens and dozens of PhD dissertations written about American Gods, and trying to sort through exactly those questions of relevance today to the 21st century. And so, I mean, this book has a kind of, it's interesting that this book has a kind of weightiness that a lot of people are starting to recognize in many different ways. There was a TV series that was made based on this, but don't watch that. This as books usually are, the book is way, way better than the TV production, way better. I believe that Neil Gaiman was not involved in the production of that as well. So he had no creative, he didn't have a creative hand in that television series. So.
Well, thanks, David, for shedding more light on this seminar, and for all of you listeners, thank you very much for being with us today. We'd love to have you as part of David's group focusing on American Gods by Neil Gaiman. And again, it starts on September 7th. It's 4 weeks long, meeting weekly at 9 a.m. Eastern, or 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern. And if you have further questions for us about the seminar, please feel free to write to me at info@classicalpursuits.com. Happy to connect you with David as well. And you can find the full details of the seminar, information about the edition we'll be using, and all of that on the website at classicalpursuits.com. And again, any questions, please feel free to email me info@classicalpursuits.com, and we'll help you out. Thanks again, David. Really looking forward to this seminar.
It's going to be a lot of fun. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, well, we'll see you on September 7th.
All right. Thank you.